Wendy just flew in from Spokane, speaking at Time Out for Women. We have a tradition here at the Latter-day Learning Retreat where we like to steal the time out for women speakers. And we're pretty open about it. We're not embarrassed because we know that they have the best people speak for them. The last time I heard Wendy speak was at World Congress on Families. How many of you went to World Congress on Families? That was amazing. Wendy is a psychologist and founder of 16 Stone Center for Growth, which is a group of mental health professionals committed to building the emotional and spiritual resilience of LDS women and their loved ones. She received her Ph.D., so she is a doctor, unlike Mark, who we said was a doctor. She really is a doctor. Sometimes we make little tiny mistakes. Wendy received her Ph.D. from the University of Michigan and an MBA from UCLA. She was part of a private practice in Ann Arbor, and she and her husband raised their 3 children. Because he is a professor at the University of Michigan, they had the flexibility to trade off schoolwork and childcare when their children were young, and so she had the rare privilege of giving birth to her 3rd child in the middle of finals week at the end of her first year as a doctoral graduate student. She said she does not recommend doing that, in case you were thinking about that. And we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Wendy.
I am delighted to be here, and I just want you to know that that baby weighed 13 pounds. So, and we did him natural childbirth. So I am the queen, right? Just so you know. It is really a privilege to be with you tonight. Can you hear okay? Is this on enough? Okay. I just want to thank you. I want to start because I don't want to forget. Thank you for what you're doing. I am a psychologist second, and I was a teacher first. And I have remained a teacher and an educator throughout my life, and I have enormous respect for the hard work and the complexity of good teaching. You are all trying to do a difficult job, and a job that is much needed in the world that we live in. And I personally am so grateful for what you're doing to make the world that I get to live in a better place by the things that you're trying to do. You come to this role for a variety of reasons and with a variety of backgrounds. How many of you have some background in education? Maybe a third, maybe half at the most. It can be pretty intimidating to take on a challenge that means so much to us, that's so important to us as educating our children, especially if we don't feel maybe as confident as we could about our own background and training to be able to do that job. But we have a lot of educators in our family. 2 of our children are college professors, as a matter of fact, and our son just started teaching. He just took a position, and he's just started teaching after months and years of doing a lot of research, and he's like, this is hard. I don't like students very much, and this is a guy who just lived to be a teacher. That's what he thought he was going into. Research was sort of secondary for him, and now he's finding out this is a difficult and challenging thing to do. So it can be really hard when we take on these challenges, and challenges always arise, to keep finding the love and the purpose and the sense of meaning and commitment to what we're doing. How many of you have found homeschooling harder than you thought it would be? How many of you have found it more fun than you thought it would be? How many of you found it more rewarding than you thought it would be? It looks like we got pretty much across the board, a lot of hands on all of those. Doing hard things, especially if we can find the fun and the meaning in it, is one of the primary sources of finding a sense of satisfaction and purpose in life. But that can seem like kind of a paradox, that things can be both really hard and really fun and meaningful at the same time. We often associate with fun with doing things that are sort of relaxing and kick back and just sort of for the pleasure that don't take a lot of effort. And it takes a lot of psychological maturity to figure out that something can be really hard and still be fun and still be really, really meaningful. That fun things also can be things that take a lot of effort. One of the indicators, in fact, of psychological maturity of all kinds is our ability to navigate paradox, to be able to see the truth in things that look like they might be contradictory on the outside. So that's been an important concept for me, because I think a lot of times we get the idea that if we're not absolutely holding people to the standard of a certain kind of truth, for example, the church, that we're just being, gullible or lazy, and that somebody might look at an institution and say, I don't understand everything that's going on here, and yet we might still believe in it, can sound like we're just being sort of unsophisticated intellectually, or naive, or not really holding ourselves or that institution to a high enough standard. But in psychology, we actually believe that the ability to hold paradoxical ideas, to say something can be true and still we don't understand it, is actually a sign of maturity, not weakness. So we're trying to learn how to navigate those paradoxes, and we're trying to teach our kids to do the same. Let me give you an example of two seemingly contradictory ideas that might both have merit. One, it takes a village to raise a child. Two, it takes a family to raise a child. Those can seem like contradictory ideas, but we have to navigate that paradox, don't we? Under what circumstances would a child especially need the resources of his or her own family? What do you think? When would a child especially need a family? Okay, finding your individual values and mission and purpose. Somebody who knows you well and shares those values would be helpful to you and your family. Yes, please, up at the top. When they're newborn and little kids, we hope those children have a family that surrounds them with a kind of stability and attachment that will help them feel secure in the world. Other times when you might especially need a family, please. Okay. It is actually the flag here. Okay, so to pass along the values of the family and the teachings of the gospel that are important, the understanding of the plan of salvation, those kinds of things are probably not going to come from a village as much as they are from a family. So when, in all circumstances, children need a family and benefit from a family. But are there some circumstances in which a child might especially need a village? When might that come up, please? When you have a teenage son who doesn't want to listen to you. That's absolutely right. And that's developmentally appropriate for teenagers and young adults. They need to learn to stand on their own. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, a little bit more. But they need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. And it's really helpful to have a village of people who share your ideals, who share your desires for your child, who are willing to step in and mentor young adults and teenagers and provide another perspective on life than the one that they've been raised with, that they're trying to figure out if they still like anymore and need to kind of push away for a while in order to make some of those decisions. And one of the things I've really learned about this in my own life as our children got older was that if I wanted other people to be available to mentor my kids when they reached young adulthood, I had to be willing to do it for other kids, because it's a two-way street. I had to get back into the village in a major way when my own children were at a developmental stage where it was appropriate for them to be kind of pushing back a little bit on mom and dad. Other times when the village might be especially helpful. Okay, when kids are struggling and when they are hurting, when they've repented, when they've come home from a mission perhaps with depression or something that's gone wrong, having that village around them as a support is really critical, isn't it? Yes, please. Yeah. We really need that village, don't we? When our children may have needs that are beyond our ability to, you know, I've got a child who's mentally disabled in some way or has a serious problem with anxiety and I don't know what to do. I need the resources of the village to kind of help me. So if I've got extra challenges in my child's life, I think it would also be true if I have extra challenges in my life. If I'm dealing with depression or anxiety or whatever it may be, I may need the resources of a village to step in and help. Okay, perfect. So when the village has resources that we can draw on, that's especially helpful. Under what circumstances might a family or a parent especially want involvement in the village? We've talked about a few. As a mentor for adults, when we're trying to draw on the resources of the village to help our child. But let me add one more. When we realize there are people in the village who need us. And I've talked about mentoring, but I'm also thinking about refugees and people in need and non-members of the church who benefit from what we have to share with the world. So the village may need us just as much as we may need the village. Now, ultimately, children benefit from both a family and a village, and both families and villages benefit from each other. But the proportion of time we may spend in those two places may vary over time, and with the needs of our children and of our family and of the village itself. As a rule, we don't need to just choose one or the other. We're trying to find a balance. We're trying to navigate this paradox in ways that helps children and families and villages to all meet the needs of all three. Finding that balance isn't easy. Some things we're trying to balance are just a matter of finding a sweet spot between two extremes and just holding really still and staying there. My dad had a parlor trick that he used to play when we were kids, and I won't be able to do this and hold a microphone at the same time, but this is the way the trick works. You're supposed to take a toothpick, and you're supposed to figure out a way to balance a fork and a knife on the toothpick on the edge of a glass. Anybody want to give it a try? Gutless. All right, somebody got to hold well, let's see. Okay, here, I will put the mic down, and in silence and respect, we will watch me. See if I can do this. Come on. Ta-da. So the idea here is to find the sweet spot between the fork and the spoon there, how close and how far, how it's leaning. But if I don't touch that, it will stay like that forever until the toothpick rots, right? As long as I'm not touching, and sometimes we get the idea in our own lives that if I could just find the right balance, things would work so much better, right? If I could find the right balance between order and creativity, if I could find the right balance between exercise and sleep, if I could find the right balance between children and spouse, if I could find the right balance, it would just hold there like that, and everything would be fine. I'm an expert at spoon and fork balancing. But it takes a lot more than an expert to help you balance the needs and the resources of your family, your village, and your child. Because children are not like toothpicks. They wiggle and they grow too big to fit into the fork, and sometimes they break. And villages are not like forks. The village, or let's make the village the spoon. The spoon of the village will sometimes be empty, or at other times it may have stellar resources that make it particularly valuable, but those are going to change the weight of the spoon. And the fork, that poor little fork of the family, is sometimes going to face crises or health challenges or shifting roles and priorities. So all of those things mean that this is not just a static thing that holds still. I have a good friend here by the name of Mark Basil. Mark, come up here for a minute. I need your help. Because real life is not like a parlor trick. Real life is more like a balance ball, a stability ball. Why would you do exercises on a stability ball?
Because it can increase your balance, your coordination, and your base of support.
Okay, and why not a chair? Why a stability?
Because it challenges your balance so that when other things come about, you can roll with it, so to speak, because you've been challenged before.
And when it moves like that, what's it doing for you? Why is that helpful?
So it's challenging you, so you have to re-stabilize yourself and kind of look at it. Oh, I went too far this way. Oh, I got to come back this way. Oh, I went too far this way.
What does that do inside your mind?
So it activates your core muscles.
That's the word I wanted. Okay, I knew he would get there. I trust him. Because I have heard about core muscles from this man until I never want to hear the word again. So we sit on a balance ball when we're doing exercises, or when we're just, sitting around at our desk sometimes. My son-in-law uses a balance ball instead of a chair at his desk, because that constant movement is what strengthens the core. And that's the image I'd like you to have in your mind when you're thinking about a balance ball. The goal is not to just get it to a point where it doesn't move. The purpose of all of that movement in our lives, or one of the outcomes of that purpose in our lives, of constant motion in trying to stay on top of that balance ball, is that it strengthens our core, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. It's as we're trying to make all those little adjustments all the time that we get better and better at knowing what we really value, what we really believe, what we really want out of life. And so there's a value in life constantly being in motion around us. I've come to believe, in fact, that God has very little interest in perfection, at least not in the way that we normally think about it. And I'll give you my evidence. How many of you have ever been in a calling where you just started to get halfway good at it, and then what happens? Yeah. How many of you have had a child and you just start to figure them out, and then what happens? They turn 13. Yeah. So just when we're starting to get the picture, the ball starts to move. And the reason, I think, is because God is not so much interested in us getting it perfect as he is in us getting stronger. And we get stronger by carrying the weight. One of my favorite stories is the Greek god story of Sisyphus. Anybody remember the story of Sisyphus? Yeah? You got it? You want to tell? You're up there a long ways. The mic's a long way down here. Thank you for offering. That was really brave. Sisyphus is a guy who makes the gods mad for some reason I don't remember anymore, and his punishment is he has to roll a stone up the hill. And just as he gets to the top, the stone rolls down. and he has to start over again. When I first heard that story as a young person, I thought I could not imagine a story that epitomized just frustration and futility and pointlessness any more than that one. You roll the stone up, it just gets to the top, you never get to see it actually make it, and it rolls back down again. And then I heard a speaker in a sacrament meeting tell this story, and she said, "But let me ask you a question. What if Sisyphus was a bodybuilder? Does that change the meaning of the story? It's no longer a story about pointlessness and frustration, is it? It's a story about getting stronger and stronger and stronger with every push up the hill. And I think that's kind of what God is doing with us in life. He's not so concerned about how fast or whether we get to the top of the hill as we define it. What he's interested in is, are we getting stronger? Is our character getting stronger? Are our values getting clearer? Is our capacity for love and charity getting better every time up the hill? Whether we get to perfect or not in this life is not what's important. It's, do we keep pushing the rock up the hill? Let me suggest some paradoxes that human beings are trying to navigate and that seem especially relevant to parents involved in homeschooling. The first one is encourage excellence, one side, support failure on the other. We all appreciate the confidence boost that comes from support and praise when we're doing hard things. But paradoxically, we may get an even bigger confidence boost by taking more risks and increasing our tolerance for failure. And so may our kids. There are a lot of women in this room. You're not the only ones in this room, but there are a lot of us. Many women in particular learned early to earn the praise and the commendation of their grade school teachers for doing their homework and playing by the rules and getting good grades. And because, as a rule, little girls' social skills and verbal skills and fine motor skills develop a little faster than their brothers do, it's pretty easy for them to get all that support and encouragement from their teachers who are overloaded and overwhelmed and who just want the kids to shut up and sit still, right? And what are the boys getting at the same time? Sit down, shut up, stop it, don't do that anymore, this is a mess. They're getting that kind of message. Now that's rough when you're a little boy who's just doing the best you can with the testosterone that you're dealing with, which is 10 times that which little girls are dealing with, even at an early age. But one of the positive outcomes for boys, at least this is one of the theories, is that they get better at brushing off that criticism, ignoring that failure, just pretending they don't even hear it. Right? The girls get their identity all wrapped up in, I'm good and I can do what the teacher wants, and you're bad and you're, messy and rambunctious and loud. And the boys get all used to putting their identity into, I'm stronger and I can do what I want and I don't care. And there are strengths and weaknesses in both positions, aren't there? When I was in high school once, I got it in my head that boys were just a bunch of, they just were full of hot air, and the girls were genuine and honest. That's how I had the world put together. So I was going to prove this point one day, and I saw this wire across the back of our cafeteria, which was a multi-purpose building. There was, we put the plays on in there and the pep rallies, and we ate. There was this wire across these windows at the top of the room. So I thought, I'm going to prove my point. And I started asking boys that were sitting around my table, so what's that wire for up there across the top of the room? And the boys would universally look at the wire and they would say, oh, that's what they use to hang lights on for the school plays. Oh, that's where they put up the Christmas lights at Christmas time. Oh, that they use that to hang posters for the pep rallies. Oh, there used to be a curtain up there. Now, these were all very plausible possibilities, but they were not expressed as plausible possibilities. They were expressed as absolute facts. I in turn would ask the girls, what's that wire for up there, do you think? And they would look at it and they would say, I have no idea. Now, at the time, I thought that proved my point. You know, girls just are honest and boys just make stuff up. But since then, I've kind of concluded, no, I think sometimes boys are just trying to be helpful. And girls are just a little intellectually lazy and scared to be wrong. So it can go both ways. Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist at Stanford who studies human resilience, comes to this conclusion. If life were one long grade school, women would be the undisputed rulers of the world. Men have a little harder time when they're young, but there's some real value that comes from learning to brush those things off and not letting them bother them as much. In addition, men seem to have some different biological makeup that makes it a little harder for them, or a little easier for them not to worry and not to ruminate and to take risks and to just get up and step up and try again when things don't go well. They get a lot of opportunities to do sports that girls don't always take, and they have to learn to keep playing basketball when they miss the shot and to take the coach's criticism and not be undone in tears because somebody told them they did something wrong. So there are lots of reasons that those differences exist. Now, why does all this matter? Because there's this old adage that if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing. And that works really well for girls when they're little, and it's a little harder as we grow older. I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, that one of the most important things I've learned as an adult is that if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. It's worth doing badly rather than not doing it at all, and it's worth doing badly while we learn to do it better. And if we can get that idea into our heads and into the heads of our children, we'll be able to better navigate this paradox between the importance of practicing perfection and the importance of practicing failure without letting it get to us. We need to be able to tolerate failure if we're going to get better at things. And if we dissolve at the first instance when things aren't going well, we're not going to get very far in life. I had the idea, I think, as a young person, that my job in mortality was to get back to God in as close as possible as I could to the state of innocent perfection I was in when I left him. Is that a familiar idea to anybody besides me? You know, that was kind of the picture I had in my mind. I came here pure and innocent, and my goal in life was to stay as perfect as I could until I got to the other side. What would be my best strategy if that were my goal? Don't move, right? Lie down in your crib, never leave. Die young. That's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to push the rock up the mountain as many times as we can, getting as strong as we can in the process. And in that process, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to do a lot of stupid things. And the reason we trusted that God's plan was a good one is because he promised he could redeem it. He promised he could fix it. And we looked in his eyes and we believed him. If we hadn't, we would have been idiots to come here. And so would our children. What are some of the hard things that are worth doing badly while we learn to do them better? Well, let me tell you, I think raising children is one of those hard things. I hope that you are cutting yourself some slack, that you're getting enough social support and encouragements, but you're also taking enough risks to earn you some criticism and failure, and the chance to be a little less sensitive to that failure. Confidence doesn't come to us automatically because we're good at things. It helps, but it's not enough. Confidence also grows when we get practice being less than perfect and not letting it stop us from taking the risks that are essential to growth and learning. Carol Dweck, whom I referenced earlier, studies resilience. And she found that the kids who were the most resilient to failure actually didn't really think they were failing. They thought they were learning. They had a different mindset, and I love her book on mindset. Our time is about up, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of these things. Let me just hit one more of those paradoxes. In this paradox, we're looking at the importance of both encouraging agreement and supporting diversity. One of the reasons that a lot of people choose homeschooling is sort of to protect what our kids are exposed to. We want our kids to be incubated in our values and shielded from harmful exposure to the spiritual and emotional toxins of this world. But I read a research study recently that caused me some reconsideration, maybe, of my efforts to just keep my children and my grandchildren safe. And this is what happened. They took two groups of 4 people, and they did this repeatedly. So half of the group, they put people in groups of 4. Half of the groups had 4 people who were all friends working on a project together. They were having to solve a complicated problem together, to which there was a right answer, and they were trying to solve that problem, 4 friends together. The other groups had 3 friends and a stranger that none of them knew, and they were to work together to solve this complicated problem. What was really curious to me was after they worked on this problem together, they asked each of the groups, how enjoyable was that experience? How much fun did you have? They also asked the groups, how confident are you that you got the right answer? The groups with 4 friends working together had a lot of fun. They enjoyed the experience, and they were quite confident that they had gotten the right answer. And in fact, they had gotten the right answer 50% of the time on a very complicated problem. The groups that had 3 people who knew each other well, were friends, and a stranger, didn't like the experience nearly as well. It was a lot harder work. It wasn't nearly as fun. They also didn't have very much confidence that they'd gotten the right answer. And they got the right answer 75% of the time. Now, I think that's a challenging and fascinating piece of research. It tells me that there are some real advantages of working together in groups where we all get along and where we see things the same. These groups stay together longer. They support each other well through hard times. But we also need plenty of opportunity to work with people who see the world differently than we do, who have different goals and different values. Those groups provide greater creativity and less groupthink, which is a tendency to think you have the right answer without seeing the flaws in your own thinking. Helping our children develop both the ability to get along with people, to develop good friendships, to learn how to find agreement, to learn to see commonalities is a valuable skill. And learning how to work in groups where we have differences of opinion, where we're not all the same, is also really important. My husband Dave taught Sunday school, high school juniors for many, many years, and he decided once, he and I are of different political persuasions at the moment, and he decided that he was going to take, but we get along really, really well. He decided he was going to take a list of the political statements of both parties in the state of Utah, mix them together, give the kids the list, and ask them to check which things they agreed with and which ones they didn't. He then told them, based on what they had checked, which political party they were most aligned with. All of these kids were affiliated because of their family's belief in one of those parties, that was the party that they understood and agreed with the most. And you can probably guess which party that would be. To their dismay, half of them ended up checking the things that they believed, what they checked would have put them in the other political party. This was absolutely horrifying to them because they thought that other political party were all the bad guys. I thought it was really interesting that I think it's really interesting still that the church does not endorse one party or another. There are general authorities right up to the top in both parties. And that one of the geniuses of Mormon wards is that they are geographic and not just self-picked. Even though we all hate having our boundaries moved and our visiting teaching and home teaching assignments changed, we need both stability of the familiar and the challenge of the unfamiliar. We need to see the good in mixed groups. We need to be able to find commonalities in things, in the complex problems that we're trying to solve together. And there is value in seeing another point of view. I heard recently a talk from Elder F. Burton Howard of the 70 from April of 1981 entitled, "In Saving Others, We Save Ourselves." He tells an extended parable of a group of travelers on a long and perilous journey. Two of those most eager to arrive at their own destination leave the group behind and set out on their own. They eventually reach a way station and they replenish their supplies, and from there one man hurries on toward his goal, only to find himself alone, exposed to the elements and the dangers of the journey without support. The second man turns back to help the others, taking them supplies that they need. But doing so not only helps them, but it helps him have protection and help as well. The larger group finally arrives at its destination intact, while the single man who headed out on his own is killed by robbers. The larger group turns to thank the man who came back for them, but he says, and this is from Elder Burton, "I have come to realize that in order to save my own life, I had to save yours as well. I now know that it is not so much the haste of one's journey, but rather what he does along the way, which determines whether he will arrive at his destination. Thank me not," he said. "In truth, I have not brought you to this place, but we have brought each other." I'm really grateful for that reminder from inspired people who help us learn not only to get along, but to go back and get those who are left behind. Not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because it helps everyone to arrive at our destination together. I hope in the great work that we are doing, we will reach out to one another and offer support. We will find ways to encourage one another when we're feeling down. We will be willing to feel like this is a community where we can take risks, to do hard things and make mistakes and not have it be the end of the trip up the mountain. That we can have absolute confidence in our Heavenly Father's ability to redeem every mistake we or our children make, if we will have confidence in His ability to keep coming back, which I know He does, and if we will trust His confidence in our ability to keep trying again, which I know He does as well. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.